Throughout this morning, we are joined by Nick Fletcher, who is Head of Military Heraldry and Technology at the Australian War Memorial and an expert on the Western Front. Nick is here to help us set the scene and give us a sense of place for the Western Front and the experiences of the Anzacs 100 years ago. Nick, it's wonderful to see you here at Villers-Bretonneux. Perhaps you could start by telling us a little bit about why it's so important, because a lot of these visitors will have seen the village, the surrounding countryside. It's quite rural and, well, quiet. Why was it so important?
Well, you're quite right, Stephanie, in saying that for the majority of the war which raged around it, Villers-Bretonneux remained a reasonably quiet and undisturbed village. It was well known to those who were in reserve positions, those who were out of the front line and were having a little bit of relaxation, but it was not an area that became really important until suddenly in 1918 it became the focus of the world's attention. And the reason, as we've just seen from the presentation, was that it's the last defendable position before the major logistics centre that is Amiens, where most of us have probably spent a few nights leading up to this event. If Villers-Bretonneux was to fall, there would be very few ways that we could stop the Germans from pushing right through to Amiens and potentially even from pushing through to the sea beyond.
And it was the Australian 13th and 15th Brigades, correct? They weren't the only ones involved, but how did the Australians become so important in the battle?
Well, there were two significant battles fought at Villers-Bretonneux in April of 1918, of course. The first taking place on the 4th of April, the Germans' offensive was pushing towards Amiens and threatening to engulf Villers-Bretonneux. As a last-minute enterprise, a sort of scratch force of Australians, mostly from the 9th Brigade, accompanied and ably assisted by British cavalry, was able to both halt the German advance and by the end of the day push them back to more or less their starting position and straighten the line. This gave the Germans pause for thought. They ceased their advance and tried in a few other areas. But later in the month, on the 24th of April, they launched another major attack on Villers-Bretonneux, and this time they were completely successful. They overran the town and occupied it. The British High Command recognised that a crisis point had been reached, and they threw in the two available Australian brigades, as you've said, the 13th and the 15th, and they made a spectacular counterattack, one of the most important acts undertaken by Australians in the First World War, and doing one of the most difficult things that any soldiers can be asked to do, which is to make an attack in darkness over unknown ground against a prepared enemy who knew they were coming. So really, it was an astonishing effort, and as I said, really one of the most important things of the many significant acts that the AIF undertook on the Western Front.
And who of the Australians stood out? Who made their name, if you like, during this battle?
The battle was significant, particularly for the two brigade commanders, Sir Thomas Glasgow, as he later became, and of course the well-known General Pompey Elliott, commander of the 15th Brigade, were the two who really showed the initiative to make the decisions on when the attack was to take place and how it was to take place. They'd been ordered by the British High Command to make the attack, but they made the final decisions on how things were going to happen and when exactly they were going to happen. And it was very much their leadership which gave their men the confidence to undertake the deeds they did. And
with the overtaking of the town, significantly and perhaps ironically, that it was on the 3rd anniversary of Anzac Day, which could not have been foreseen, surely.
No, indeed it couldn't, but it certainly wasn't unknown to the men taking part in the attack. Many of the men who attacked at Villers-Bretonneux on the night of the 24th were veterans of the landing at Gallipoli only 3 years earlier, so they were well aware already of the significance of the date, and I think probably it helped to boost their morale and gave them that encouragement to make the attack.
Now, it wasn't just the fact that Australia or the Australian troops helped to recapture Villers-Bretonneux and give it back to the people of the village. There remains a very strong bond between the villagers today. How did that come about?
Yeah, as you can imagine, Stephanie, the village was really desolated by the war, heavily shelled and fought over. British and Australian troops had to actually clear the village on the night of the 24th and through into the 25th of April. That was a difficult, arduous process and very, very destructive. So when the community returned to their homes, they were to find a very much a shattered landscape, and very few of the buildings in the village were undamaged. In Australia, the name Villers-Bretonneux had already become quite famous. It became clear very quickly that Australia was going to hold Villers-Bretonneux in its heart as having been a very significant spot. And when the time came to reconstruct the village, the people of Victoria, and most particularly the school students of Victoria, raised funds which they sent to France to contribute to the construction of the school, which eventually became the École Victoria, which still stands today, of course.
Yeah, I'm sure many of you have had the chance to go and have a look at that. That was returned, though, wasn't it, by the children of Villers-Bretonneux for the Victorian school kids?
Indeed, after the recent fires, the children of Villers-Bretonneux raised money which they then sent back to Victoria to assist those in need there, and I think that was really a wonderful closing of the circle and helped to confirm that strong bond that still exists today between Australians and those citizens of Villers-Bretonneux.
Yes, certainly. It's a wonderful bond, and I hope you will get the chance to experience that in the village of Villers-Bretonneux. Nick Fletcher, thank you very much for that. We'll talk a little bit about the memorial and the Sir John Monash Centre and the military cemetery here in a little while, but thank you so much for now.
My pleasure.
Please thank Nick Fletcher.